Hi everybody, it's Dee. I'm sorry I can't spend the morning or afternoon with you. Unfortunately, I'm double booked and we'll be relying on you guys as my co-coordinators of this program to make the work come alive. So this will be the first time we're going to have some additional immersive experiences around our BUF alignment. You remember in the summertime we came together and we talked about some of the gaps that we had in our curriculum. If our goal is to achieve paired literacy, we were going to need to close some of those gaps. Knowing that there's little we can do to manipulate our CLM and Lucy Calkins curriculum, I'm asking the team to really focus in on how we can use the BUFs to close some of those gaps. So I want to make you aware of a couple of things. First of all, that I've established a biliteracy unit framework team drive. So after this slide, I'd like you to go in and look at that team drive. In there is a folder for every single grade level, and there are a few templates which I will be referring to in the activities throughout the rest of the presentation. So let's take a look at some of the learning objectives for today. Before we do that, I just want to say that this summer, again, we had a really condensed opportunity to address the gaps in our paired literacy curriculum. And paired literacy involves both the comprehensive literacy units and also the BUFs. The BUFs are pretty significant to our students because they provide them with the daily opportunities for instruction in reading and writing in the content areas that they need every day to ensure biliteracy. So at each grade level, 2 to 5, you guys took a look at the writing types that were missing or had gaps in them. Today what I'm going to ask you to do is to take a deeper look at the standards that the students are going to be able to access in those writing types that you've selected. And I'm going to ask you to do two things this year. First, I'm going to ask you to ensure that each BUF has standards aligned and clear language and content objectives. The second thing is I want you to ensure that each BUF has a common integrated assessment of language and content. So in order to make some moves towards those objectives this year, today we are going to solidify our choices around the selected writing type per BUF. We are going to align Common Core state standards to the skills that are going to be taught in the unit. We are going to select a writing task that serves as the integrated performance assessment of language and content, and we are going to be creating a rubric for those tasks. I really want the team to focus on units 1 through 3. It'd be great if we can do 1 through 4 or even more. However, please be focused on units 1 through 3. So what's the difference between a standards-based versus a standards-aligned curriculum? A standards-aligned curriculum builds a unit around a topic or a theme and then applies standards to that topic or theme. Essentially, we've done that with our BUFs. We've picked the science units based on the science themes we wanted to teach and the social studies units on the social studies themes that we wanted to teach. And then from there, we built in standards that assured us that we were actually meeting some standards throughout the instruction of the unit. In terms of writing and where we're going with writing, we're going to be taking a different approach. We are actually going to be starting with the writing standards first, and then we're going to be applying them to the unit. So we're going to think about what do these standards mean, what skills and demands do students need to fulfill, what teaching moves are going to ensure that our students are able to fulfill the demands of the writing genre, and then finally, how are we going to assess it? So we're really going to look at curriculum and instruction a little bit differently than we have in the past. We want to ensure all of our students have access to the standards and that all of our students are producing evidence of those standards through purposeful tasks. So we want to really focus on the activities and the assessment not being the end, but that the skill of the standards being the end point, and that our students have a really clear understanding of what those skills are, and that our instruction is aligned explicitly to teach and demonstrate and ensure student mastery. So each team will be receiving the posters that we started to create this summer, and you can remember on those posters we had all of our CLM units down, we had all of our BUF units down, and I asked the teams to really take a look at the gaps. We've done a really good job with identifying our next generation science standards and our Wisconsin social studies standards. However, given the gaps that we have in our students' access to language input and output, I've asked you to take a look at the writing genres. So why writing? Why writing first? We need to address the gaps in writing because writing is the usual measure of all linguistic output. Knowing the demands on our students as writers will support our language instruction and our reading instruction in science and social studies. In essence, when we start with writing, we are offered the opportunity to understand the language big idea. What do students need to accomplish with language? This will help us to define each unit, and then we'll be able to create language objectives for each unit that will help us to define a task, and then finally how we'll be assessing that task. Later, we'll begin to ask ourselves, what do we need to do in our reading instruction during the BUF so that our students accomplish the writing skills that we are going to ultimately be assessing. So before we begin to work on our standards mapping for the rest of our day, I want you to locate the document that I have photocopied for you with our current 2nd through 5th grade standards on them. It will give you an opportunity to notice some of the gaps, first at your own grade level, and then across the grades. I was able to highlight in yellow some of the gaps that were most noticeable to me. So when you start with your grade, notice the gaps in curriculum in English and in Spanish for the reading literature standards and then the informational text standards. What I did is I put an X under each of the standards if it was ever taught at all in the grade level. In the case of writing, I did a little bit more. I actually noted how many times the standard was taught in writing by language so that you could really focus your work today. I'm not going to ask you to do more than just a reflection of that. So when my voice stops, if you could pause the video and make a reflection around some of the gaps that you see and kind of call that data out, that would be certainly very helpful. Specifically, what you're going to want to do is make a final decision about the writing pieces that you've added to your BUFs and if that indeed is going to close the gaps and make more of an equal experience between English and Spanish and the types of writing throughout your grade level. So your next steps will be to stop the video and take a look at the standards and make some noticings about what's there, what's missing, and refer back to your standards map, your large butcher paper map, and be sure that you have made some logical choices around argument, informational, and narrative types of writing in the BUF that will help our students to achieve paired literacy. And when you're finished with that, you can come on back to the video. Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope that you're feeling positive and feeling that we can do something about some of the gaps that we see our students experiencing through our curriculum. I'd like us now to move on to a slide which you've already seen before in the summer, and that's when we took a little bit of a deeper dive into the buckets of writing. They're in buckets only because I placed them into buckets. We're going to refer to argumentative, informational, and narrative writing as types of writing. They're not genres, they're just types of writing, and they're represented by the anchor standard 1 for argument, 2 for informational writing, and 3 for narrative writing. As you can see from the above slide, the writing standards are laid out in the 3 types of writing. The first standard is argumentative, but aligned to the argumentative standard is also standard 4, 5, and 6. Standard 2 is informational writing, and aligned is standard 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And standard 3 is narrative, and also aligned are standards 4, 5, 7, and 8. The other standards are mapped in a way for you to see some connections between the skills that are required for students to be able to write proficiently within that overarching standard 1, 2, or 3. Standard 4 is one of the standards that transcends all of the writing types because it asks our writers to think about the end user and to write for a real purpose in a real audience. Within our BUFs, this offers tremendous opportunity for our students to use writing for real reasons and to accomplish more than just completing a task and to connect outside of our schools. Many of you are already doing this in a really beautiful way. Finally, Standard 10 asks students to write routinely, which means they need to be writing volumes and writing a lot. Our BUFs do not intend to recreate the Lucy Calkins units. I'm wondering if you guys are wondering that. We will not be recreating Lucy Calkins. There are plenty of ways that our students can continue to write and develop their understanding of these writing types, and the purpose of these writing types, the audience and the language that are used in these types, so that they can begin to communicate relevant science and social studies topics. And I'm hoping that they will offer you lots of creativity in doing so. So the big ideas here is that we will be able to extract the big idea about language and content, that we'll be able to build our language objectives, achieve paired literacy opportunities for our students, and use real ways and real reasons that people write to achieve this. So for the next activity, you and your team are going to need a considerable amount of time. So I'm going to give you the instructions here and then let you really dig in and work. So you and your team will be looking very deeply at the standards for writing. I've given each team a template for both argumentative and informational text writing. What I do want you to know is that the language standards are not yet embedded into the writing standards. We will deal with that at a different time. What I would encourage teams to do is to actually make enough copies of the standards that you can actually tape them below the area on your curriculum map where you have designated the type of writing that you would like to do. Together, you will be deciding as you read through those standards and listing the skills that the students will demonstrate as the result of their proficiency in meeting the standard that you wish to teach. On the good side, there's a lot of flexibility in the language of the standard. However, there are words like some and clearly, words that are left really open for interpretation by teams and individual teachers. This is really great. However, sometimes the openness also poses a problem in that what is clear to one community and one expectation might not be accepted as clear by another. So given that we will be creating common assessment, teams will need to define ambiguous words to the greatest extent possible so that the meaning is super clear. So for this next activity, I want you to get onto your curriculum map, and I'd like you to tape down these standards. And I want you to think really specifically about the standards that you want to teach students so that you can ensure the skills deepen each time that student has contact with that standard over the course of the year. It's really important. So if you're teaching informational writing more than one time in one language, you're going to need to make sure that how you're teaching it the second and the third time that you're doing it actually goes deeper and deeper in the skill and expectation. Your team will need to be really, really clear about the skills that you're going to develop in your students during each unit. So what I'm going to ask you to do is after you tape down the standards and you're beginning to think about the skills that you want the kids to learn in that particular unit, I actually want you to write them as I can statements. Those I can statements will serve as a guide for instruction later on. Okay? So pause the presentation and take the time that you need to work on this activity. I want you to keep in mind that there's still 2 more activities to accomplish at the end, so you might want to give yourselves an hour for this and then come back and recheck the presentation. Our next steps after this part of it will actually be choosing our task. What is our task or our performance assessment going to look like? What is it going to be? And then finally, how are we going to construct the rubric so that we actually have a common assessment with common assessment criteria? Welcome back, everybody. I've labeled this slide now the fun part because this is the part that I feel like you guys are just really, really going to soar through. So in this activity, your team will be making some choices about the task, the purpose, and the audience for your learners to demonstrate their skills. I want you to be aware that while only 3rd through 5th grade actually requires students to demonstrate organization and structure that is specific to the task, the purpose, and the audience, I'm asking that we all think about these 3 elements when choosing how our students will demonstrate and communicate their learning. The reason why I'm asking everyone to consider this is because in our dual language program we have not only the goal of biliteracy and bilingualism and academic achievement, we also have the goal of multicultural and global competency. And one of the things that I really believe that all of our students are capable of from the second grade through the fifth grade is in making an impact, a real impact in our community, which includes our classroom, our school, our families, and our greater community. So remember, the choices that you're going to make here for the task you want students to engage in should actually have a real purpose and a real end audience that is more than just the kid sitting next to the student or the teacher. So also keep in mind that the end product is really not about the product, it's about the opportunity that students have to show their skills. When you are assessing the end product, you will be assessing the skills that you've identified in your curriculum map. Please ensure that your team has selected the writing task or tasks that you will be offering to students by the end of this section before moving on. Well, you've made it, yay! This is the last slide. So this is officially going to be setting up the work for today and probably the work that we'll be doing over the course of a few sessions. This is the time when we begin to build rubrics. So to build your rubrics for each of the BUF tasks, it's really important that what is being assessed is accessible to our learners in student-friendly language. For this reason, I would like teams to use the continuum for science in Spanish for the assessment of the science content, and to use the Lucy Calkins checklists in Spanish to assess the writing. And then for the social studies BUFs, I would like you to only use the Lucy Calkins rubric for the writing type that you've chosen because the social studies continuum is not yet available. I hope it will be soon, and I'll bring that to the next session that we work through. So the goal here is to get into the sample checklist template, which is in the team drive. You're going to need to make a copy of that template for every BUF that you have. And what you're going to do is that you are going to copy and paste the science continuum skill that you're going to be assessing, as well as the skills from the Lucy Calkins checklist that you will be assessing as a result of the task that you've planned for students. I'm going to give you in your agenda the links to all of this so that you're able to find it really easy and you can begin to start working. One of the things you should notice is that the checklist is essentially a one-point rubric. Students are able to do it or they're not. It doesn't give information to students about how they can improve their work. That's something that we're going to have to look at in the future a little further out. So I do recognize that there are some limitations and just want to be aware of that. Okay, thanks so much, and I'm really happy that we're doing the work. Bye!